First story. Just because you're a professor doesn't mean you're untouchable. I'm a student at a local community college because the general education classes are much cheaper. I had a heart transplant when I was younger, but it was too late and now I suffer from chronic nerve pain that only gets worse the more active I am. So I have a handicapped parking pass. One thing to note is that at this college with 5,000 plus students, there is roughly 20 to 30 handicapped spaces. On an average day, there is more unused faculty spaces than handicapped spaces total. Fast forward to my third semester. I had gotten into the habit of arriving 1.5 to 2 hours early to make sure I got a handicapped spot because the next closest spaces are about 1,200 feet away, and you had to climb a hill to get to the main building. I'd kill time by doing homework with my friends or playing D&D. The first day of the semester I parked in. As I'm getting my laptop out of my car, I noticed that another car had pulled up behind mine. The driver, she will be referred to as Karen hereby, asked if I was parking there. I of course answered yes, I have a placard. She scoffs and says out loud, "Whose is it? Your grandmother's?" And she drives away. At the time, I didn't think too much of it. I'm young and don't have a wooden leg or anything. So it's happened before. The next day, I arrive like I always do and notice that all the handicapped spots are full and that the same car from yesterday is parked there. This time, I recognize the woman in it. She's an English professor. One of my friends has her for 18th century literature. I find this odd because the faculty spots are really close by. Karen sees me and smirks. Whatever, I suck it up and park. That day, me and my friends were playing D&D in a room we found. Karen walks by and sees me and my friends and tells us that we're not allowed to be there and we need to leave this second. Now I'm really angry. She's only doing this to be a witch. We weren't hurting anyone and her class next door doesn't even start for almost an hour. But she still sits in that room and reads a novel. She does the same thing every chance she gets for weeks. So I've been thinking of a way to solve this problem for most of the semester. Talking to the English department's head, my literature of science fiction teacher, I found out that she doesn't even have a placard. The one she hung from her mirror is her grown son's. And now I know what to do. Here's what I did. I reserved the room she had her class in until 5 minutes before her class for Dungeons and Dragons Club, with a sign and everything. Then I alerted campus police that several people were using other people's handicap tags. For those unaware, you get paperwork when you get one validating that it's yours. In my state, using one that is not yours is a towable offense and an automatic fine. So campus police start asking for people's paperwork. That day starts like most others that semester. Get there, she's in a handicapped spot. I go to play Dungeons and Dragons. But when she comes to kick us out of her room, she can't because I've reserved it. After I inform her of this, she storms off mumbling about seeing the dean. She comes back for her class, but by that time I'm on my way out. After my class, I go out to the lot and notice that her car is missing. The next day, I drive and Karen's car isn't in one of the spots. It was towed. Best feeling of my life that day. My friend tells me later that she arrived at class 10 minutes late that day and was covered in sweat. She biked there for the rest of the semester. Never had a problem with her for the rest of that semester. And I never had a problem with her for the rest of that semester. Next story. You want me to account for all of the property? In 2014, I was deployed to a base somewhere in the Middle East. I was an intelligence officer. However, the needs of the army said you're going to head up the logistics section. I really had no clue what I was doing. Thankfully, my non-commissioned officer was a subject matter expert in this area. During this time, I ended up being named the primary hand receipt holder for pretty much all of the property on the base. It was about $30 million. Army regulations stipulate that financial losses for property loss are limited to several months of base pay IIRS for sub-hand receipt holders. For myself, on the other hand, I could potentially have been responsible for all of the dollars for whatever I don't sign off to someone else. So as I'm assigning sub-hand receipt holders, a facility with about 70 of my computer's $70,000 lost their only army worker. It was mainly staffed by contractors. This posed a significant problem. I had no one to sub-hand receipt to, and I couldn't realistically maintain situational awareness of this facility from my other duties. So I picked up the phone and called the person at another base who oversaw this area. "Ma'am, we have a problem. I need you to send someone up here to sign for this equipment as I can't." Major so-and-so tells me, "You need to figure it out, Lieutenant." "Ma'am, the only option I have at present time, per Army regulations, is taking physical custody of all these computers until such a time where a person qualified to sign for this equipment can be here." There is a long pause. While I was technically right, there were other less abrasive actions I could have taken. I just did them because I didn't like the Major anyways. So I get called into my commander's office and she just a tad upset. "Lieutenant, stand at attention." So at this point I'm about to get chewed out. "Did you tell Major so-and-so you were taking her computers?" "Yes, ma'am." "Why?" I quote the regulation and the fact that I don't have $70,000 on hand. "Why didn't you ask me?" I tell her when I was made the primary hand receipt holder, I was told I need to follow the Command Supply Discipline Program and Army regulations. Furthermore, you said yourself that you were delegating your command authority to me by appointing me as a PHRH. In doing so, as it pertains to property, I have sole discretion to act when there is not a sub-hand receipt holder available. She tells me, "Yes, you're correct. I will appoint someone to sign for this. Please do not threaten field grade officers." Roger that. Due to my actions, I was the only person to leave my position on time and had 0 investigations for property loss leveled against me. We also transferred and/or cut over $15 million worth of equipment. I received an Army Commendation Medal for my job over there. The Major was involved with her own investigations, and while I'm not privy to all of them, she never got promoted. Next story. Boomer pushed to the edge over 60 cents. The scene. It is a local McDonald's in summer of 2020. COVID is raging and I'm a young shift manager handing drinks out the drive-thru window. An old man pulls up and I hand him his cappuccino. The boomer tells me, "I didn't order a hot beverage." "Yes, you did, sir. This is a cappuccino. Unless you wanted the iced coffee frap." "Yeah, one of those iced cappuccino things." "That's Tim Hortons. There is one right across the street if you'd like." Okay, take this warm crab back and give me my money." "Unfortunately, I cannot take anything back into the restaurant because of the pandemic. I can still refund you though." "No, I don't want it. Take it back." "Once you've touched it, I can't, sir. I'm sorry." The boomer proceeds to mutter about whatever and peels off. I see him pull around to get out of his car. I find a co-worker to cover me while I head over to the front counter. I know this guy is pissed and I'm ready to make his day even harder. He storms in. "Give me one of those iced frap things. I don't want this." "Sir, I still can't take it back, but there is garbage all around you." He takes a step back, removes the lid and lifts the cup as if to pour it on the floor. "Fine, I'll pour it all over the floor then." "No, you won't." A standoff ensues. I ring up an iced coffee frap and see that his refund is about 60 cents short of that frap. Normally, I would waive that without a second thought for customer satisfaction. It's McDonald's, 60 cents doesn't mean anything to them. But when you threaten to pour your drink out like a child, you lose that generosity. Look, would you like the frab? I have your refund right here, and I can put it toward the frab.
Fine.
He then proceeds to throw his cappuccino out. Unfortunately, sir, the frab is 60 cents more expensive than what you paid for. I'm gonna need you to pay the difference because the cappuccino was an honest mistake on our end considering what you thought you were ordering.
What?
Then he proceeds to yell every swear in the book at me while I stare him down unchanged. At this point, I had handled him start to finish. My senior manager jumped in once the boomer yelled loud enough for the whole restaurant to hear, and he kicked him out without a second thought. The boomer left without his refund, cappuccino, or frab. It was a good day. It is. For my non-Canadian friends, a gentleman wanted an iced cab, which is a very distinct beverage from Tim Hortons. The iced frap or any other variation of iced cappuccino was not what he was looking for. His day would have been fine if he had taken his money from the window and drove across the street to Tim's. Next story. Short medium pay? About 15 years ago I took a 1099 gig. Hauling private cars from the upper Midwest to LA/Phoenix. This guy was a bit shady, but I wanted away from my prior job and I figured I could deal with it, as the money was good. It was quite a piece of work, booking cars and then basically refusing to answer any calls after they were picked up, which would occasionally result in a threat to have the police waiting when I contacted the customer about delivery. I also came to realize after a few weeks that he and his wife were speed freaks. But moving on. We were paid for our trips every week as soon as we got back to town. Most of what we did was cash on delivery, and our pay would be counted out of the cash part of that. Some money would be in checks. After I'd worked there for about 6 months, a slow week happened, and they were unable to get enough cars to make a load home, but were able to get enough to get me to Denver and then back to LA to reload to come home. No big deal. I had enough in the bank to cover bills at home, and it wouldn't be the first time I was out longer than a week, so the wife and kids understood. So I get to the yard, grab all my paperwork, and head to his house to get paid. He normally just sits at his desk and runs a number and counts out the cash to pay us. This time, about halfway through, he grabs everything and heads upstairs, saying he will be right back. Apparently, 40 minutes counts as right back to a speed freak, and he finally comes back down and gives me this pile about how I can only pay you for the outbound trip because insert various nonsense excuses here. The real reason for not being able to pay me is that too many cars on that particular trip were not cash on delivery, and he found reasons to drop what cars he could pay me for until that number was low enough that he had enough cash in hand. I kept my cool and took what he offered, and I acted as if it was no big deal. I planned on running the next turn, keeping what he owed me, and walking away. I did my turn, told him where to find the truck, not our normal spot but in the same town, and I left. Unfortunately, that turn was heavy in checks, and there wasn't enough cash to cover what I was due. I initially kept enough in checks to make up the difference, but decided the next day that I wasn't going to cash checks written to the company and went to his house to give him the checks. That went about as well as you would imagine it would. It's actually kind of amusing to be called a thief by a crook. The final exchange of the visit.
You're just a stupid truck driver, and you'll never see any of that money.
Well, I may be a stupid truck driver. I'm not. But you'll be sorry you screwed with me. I told him that and I walked away. First stop. Request IRS determination of status as employee or contractor. Plenty of trucking companies pay via 1099. Even though it's plain the drivers are employees, it's an area the IRS has been cracking down on. After these determinations, this IRS will also start asking pointed questions about withholding, questions for which he had not answered. Second stop, State Labor Board with IRS determination in hand, filing a complaint of failure to pay wages. This drag went on for a few months, typical bureaucracy, until he had ignored enough of their letters that we could move on. In this particular state, if the labor board did the small claims filing, it could only be for the wages. If I filed a claim myself, I could claim up to 2 or 3 times the amount if it was a willful non-payment as punitive damages. The labor board, like the IRS, would have questions of their own that weren't just going to go away. Third stop, Small Claims Court. He never responded to the claim until the day before the hearing, when I received a letter from the bankruptcy court that he had filed for bankruptcy. And fourth stop, United States Bankruptcy Court. By now this is months later, and it was amusing because she had obviously, as in 50 pounds obviously, come off the speed. My paperwork was done as if by a professional, to the point the judge jokingly asked if I could teach paperwork classes to the attorneys who frequented his courtroom. Nothing really memorable happened that day other than the look on the judge's face when their lawyers said we don't agree with the IRS determination, and had no answer to the question of why not. We were awarded our owed wages. 2 other guys who had since quit this idiot had piggybacked on the work I'd done on this. He wasn't amused by the big smile I gave him out in front of the courthouse as we left, but he knew that this time he was on the receiving end of the shaft. Fifth stop, well, we each got about 1/3 of what was owed to us before he quit paying the bankruptcy trustee. And Tommy, my former employer, lost his business. All 3 trucks were repossessed. He now has an ST mark on his credit, and last I heard he was driving a piece of crap truck for someone else out in Vegas. That was more satisfaction than the money, which I had long since gotten